Good evening and welcome to Tyler Carlin. Tonight, there is a poignant but recognizable thing that happens to frauds when they're exposed. They don't own it. They don't apologize. Instead, they panic. They scramble for control. They start posting vague apologies on TikTok, hiding behind ring lights and empty platitudes. On the surface, it makes no sense. Everyone groans. How is this kid still talking? Does he believe his own talking points, and does he think we're stupid? And the answer, of course, is yes, he does. He thinks he can outlast the truth. He thinks if he just smiles long enough, we'll forget what he did. But beneath that plastic grin is the panic of a man, or boy, who knows the game is up, who knows the power he has, and he was handed, unearned, undeserved, is slipping through his fingers. And the faster it slips, the more desperately he clings onto it. The videos get louder, the lies get weirder, the Snapchats get creepier. Oh, it's not strength, it's a collapse. And we're watching it happen in real time. It's not just sad, it's symbolic. Because when the face of a fraudulent system cracks, you start to see how rotten it was all along. Tonight, we're diving into the scandal that was so laughably pathetic and so morally bankrupt, it would make your brain leak out like a side effect from bad medicine. We're talking about, of course, Harry Sisson, the Democratic TikTok influencer who, behind his carefully curated hashtags and ring light selfies, turned out to be nothing more than a manipulative clout-chasing predator. Now, when the DNC said that they wanted to reach out to Gen Z, they didn't really mean engage young people in any substantive way. No, they meant, let's find a guy who looks like Balloon Boy from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, dress him up in political slogans and slap a ring light on his face and send him off to sexually harass a dozen young girls while shouting, "Vote blue no matter who!" and let him run a sleazy little show. And then they found Harry Sisson. This is the man they paraded as their ambassador, a walking, talking PSA for vote blue no matter who, the alleged Democratic TikTok influencer who, as it turns out, was secretly playing the lead role in a live-action remake of Boing Boing, even as he juggled more women than a cruise ship magician. So why is the DNC spending your money to elevate immature influencers instead of amplifying powerful voices like Walter Masterson, Brian Tyler Cohen, Jesse Dollemore and the Good Liars, David Pakman, Adam Mockler and myself? This is the question we have to ask ourselves. Why is no one else talking about this? Why is it that if you so much question the state of the DNC's messaging, you're labeled as ignorant and as someone who can't keep up, and you're labeled as a bigot? And why was this the face of their digital strategy? You're not allowed to ask that. Why? Because asking is racist. And let's not forget his bestie, White Dudes for Harris. He's a guy so self-parodying that he makes Pete Buttigieg look like a biker gang leader. You want to know what's racist? Running an entire TikTok campaign pretending to be a white savior for Kamala Harris, while real activists doing real grassroots work are struggling to get a retweet. This is what happens when you substitute image for substance, when your idea of political outreach is handing a ring light to a hormonal teenager and saying, "Dance for democracy, dance! Dance, peasants, dance!" You don't get a movement, you get Harry Sisson. And when the curtain is finally pulled back, we realize that the DNC's golden boy was just a clout-chasing predator. You don't just get disillusionment, you get rage. Now don't misunderstand me, this isn't about Harry's stupidity. I mean, yes, the man is so dumb he could drown in a kiddie pool. But this is about the system that propped him up, that paid him, that platformed him, that trusted him. This is the guy that they said represented us, Gen Z, millennials, young voters. This was their ambassador, a walking, talking PSA for why we don't trust influencers. This is the guy they chose instead of actual organizers, instead of the people who are in the trenches, instead of activists, whistleblowers, and anyone with integrity. And the worst part, the girls he manipulated were all 18 to 19-year-olds and young adults. They tried to warn us, they warned people, but no one cared. Why? Because Harry had the blue check, because Harry had the access, because Harry was parroting exactly what the DNC wanted to hear. You see, the far left and their demagogues don't just disagree with you, they don't just ignore you, they hate you. They hate your intelligence because it makes them feel small. They hate your questions because it exposes the scam. And they hate that you exist outside their algorithm because they can control what they can't monetize. And you know what scares them the most? That you're not alone anymore. Harry was paid to do the DNC's dirty work, parroting party lines, singing praises of Biden, and taking cheap shots at anyone who dared to question the narrative. But behind closed doors, however, he was busy DMing young chicks, stringing them along and ghosting them like a one-man emotional Ponzi scheme. And now that his true colors are out in the open, what do we get? A deafening silence from the DNC, a silence that speaks louder than any apology ever could. We're not making any of this up, by the way. It's not a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's not QAnon. It's all real. In fact, it's so real that he conceded that it's real. Here's one of the tweets. Look at this. He told me I was the only one. He made me feel special. We trauma bonded. I believed him. And then I found out about the others. There were so many others. This isn't some trivial breakup drama. It's cold, calculated predatory behavior. It's manipulation dressed up in progressive buzzwords, a sick exploitation of trust that should have no place in any movement claiming to believe women. And the sick irony is that it worked for years. Harry Sisson, with his blue check and polished image, managed to fool a whole generation, even as he built his personal TikTok harem behind the scenes. But wait, there's more. Listen to this next testimony, all right? He knew I was a survivor. He knew I had been abused before. And he still used me. He still made me feel like it was my fault. So you look at that and you think, on one hand, why is this person lecturing us on how to treat women? Someone who's never had a real job before besides grifting. That's crazy. And then on the other level, the more deep level, the more important level, you realize what a tragedy you just saw. Here is someone who is profoundly troubled, who needs real help and care and empathy and love from the adults in his life. But he's not getting any of that. This is what happens when you have no father figures growing up. Instead, he was carted out like a sideshow freak for the profit of others. They used that young man in exactly the way they used Joe Biden, and by the way, Kamala Harris, who obviously got snubbed by Joe Biden, and the DNC's corrupt, rigged tactic, and how the right used Donald Trump to let foreign governments control them. None of them have any idea what's going on, and they're being used by people for the benefit of those people. But you can't say anything, because then you'd be a conspiracy theorist. Be quiet! I mean, come on. No genuine remorse, no heartfelt apology, just a pathetic, half-assed non-apology that basically tells his victims, "Oh, please respect my privacy." Privacy? When you exploit vulnerable young girls and then ask for privacy like you're entitled to a cloak of invisibility, you're not offering an apology. You're doubling down on your betrayal. And while Harry's busy exploiting his victims, the DNC just stands by in scandalous silence. They paid him, they boosted his profile. They handed him a microphone and expected him to recite their talking points, all while ignoring the very real harm he inflicted on real people. Meanwhile, real activists, those who are out there on the front lines, the streets, organizing mutual aid and fighting for genuine change, get left out in the cold. This is the rotten underbelly of modern politics. Aesthetics and shallow image trumps substance and accountability. Let's talk dollars and cents too, by the way. This snake pocketed a total of $19,000 in consulting fees from Midas Touch and Democracy Defense Action. $19,000. Money that could have been used to support grassroots organizers to fund community projects, while he used that to cash his and fuel his personal brand of exploitation. And the DNC, in their infinite wisdom, chose him as his poster boy for Gen Z engagement. Instead of actual real organizers and with grit and backbone, they handed the spotlight to a man whose only talent was being a clout-chasing fraud. And here I am doing this for free. No one's writing me checks. No PAC is slipping money into my Venmo. I'm not being invited to DNC events or getting flown out to DC in exchange for parroting talking points because I don't have handlers. I don't have a script. I have got a camera, a voice, and a hell of a lot of rage. Meanwhile, these absolute clowns like Harry Sisson get paid thousands, literal thousands, to shill whatever the Democratic Party tells them to. He gets propped up like some Gen Z Moses parting the sea of ignorance with a ring light and a pre-written script, while people like me and you are left fighting for the scraps in the algorithm, screaming into the void. And why? Why am I doing this for free while he gets the spotlight? Because the DNC's risk assessment says people like me, the honest ones, the bold ones, the ones who actually give a damn, are too risky to platform. Too risky? Let me tell you what's risky. Paying a manipulative clout-chasing predator to be the face of your youth outreach program. That's risky. Meanwhile, the real fighters, the real voices of truth, Jesse Dollamore, Walter Masterson, Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pacman, Adam Mockler, myself, the good liars, the ones who actually moved the needle, the who take risks day by day, telling the truth to power. They don't get your attention. They don't get your checks because they're not safe, because they're not soft, because they can't be bought, because they won't sit there and clap like trained seals. Well, guess what? You backed the wrong people. You threw your money behind predators, frauds, and TikTok grifters and narcissists, and now you're paying for it. You got exposed. And frankly, you deserved every last bit of what hit you, because this is what happens when you reward mediocrity and punish conviction. When you choose aesthetics over integrity. When you trade truth for comfort. So keep your checks, keep your fake smiles, keep your empty risk assessments, because we're the ones who are doing the real work. We don't need your approval. We've got the people. And that's more powerful than anything you've got in your donor spreadsheet. I don't work for you. I work for the truth. Anyways, and then comes the so-called apology. Picture this. Harry posts a TikTok saying, "Yes, I talked to multiple people. No, I didn't promise exclusivity. This is being blown out of proportion. Please respect my privacy."
I want to talk openly and honestly about this entire controversy that has exploded in the past week. First and foremost, I want to start by saying I fucked up. I should have told the people I was talking to that there were other people, and of course I regret that decision, and I've reflected on it a lot, and I'm learning and going to be better in the future. Now, what I will say is that this entire situation has been blown wildly out of proportion by MAGA Republicans to further their political agenda. Like, we all know that they don't actually care about this. They just hate me. That's why they care. I mean, when has MAGA ever cared about women? Also, MAGA has been spreading misinformation about the situation, so I want to set the record straight. I was not in a relationship with anyone. I wasn't exclusive with anyone. I never met anybody in person. I never spoke to anybody on the phone, and it was done among consensual adults.
Who acts like that? Well, sociopaths do. Respect your privacy? When you've built a platform on moral posturing only to exploit those who trust you, you don't get an apology. You get a punch in the face to every survivor who ever came forward. It's a pathetic excuse for accountability, and it's exactly why people are losing faith. Let's be brutally honest, okay? While the left preaches progress and integrity, they're too busy polishing the image of a predator to care about the real damage he's done. They've substituted substance for style, turning what should be a movement into a shallow beauty contest where the only prize is a TikTok following, and that, my friends, is why trust in liberals is hemorrhaging. I want you to picture this, right? The DNC, in their quest for youthful appeal, hands over their platform to a man whose idea of leadership is sending shirtless Snapchat selfies and trading empty promises on social media. They wanted a Gen Z political activist, and instead they got a horny clout goblin who manipulated vulnerable young women while reading off pre-written scripts. When the truth finally surfaced, all we got was silence. A silence so loud that it tells us everything we need to know about the state of the party. They lied, and they know it. And they want you to accept their lies. Or you'll just shut up and eat what's for dinner and won't ask any questions. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. The DNC's silence in the wake of Harry's exposure is not just an oversight, it's a betrayal. It tells you that when things go wrong, when a predator is exposed, the party is willing to turn a blind eye rather than take responsibility. And that right there is why voters are walking away. When you see your political party platforming a serial manipulator, you start to wonder, what do they really stand for? Because let's not sugarcoat it. This isn't an isolated incident. This is systemic rot. This is the whole ecosystem of influencers, of activists who use social media to build a brand out of shallow values and empty rhetoric. They dress up in their deceit in progressive language, but at the core they're just predators and frauds and opportunists. And Harry Sisson is the poster child for this decay. We've seen the texts, we've seen the receipts, the late-night messages, the gaslighting, the incessant self-promotion, all designed to make him look like the savior of a generation, while in reality he's nothing more than a con artist exploiting his victims. And when these victims speak out, instead of receiving support, they're met with skepticism, smears, and outright dismissal. That's the real tragedy here. Let me be clear. If you care about protecting women, if you care about real accountability, then you need to demand answers from the DNC. They backed a predator. They handed him the mic and expected him to charm his way out of every transgression. And when the evidence piled up, the screenshots, the testimonials, the naked, unvarnished truth, they stayed silent. They never issued an apology. They never distanced themselves. They simply allowed Harry Sisson to continue and become a symbol of their failure. This is why the left is hemorrhaging trust. Because while they talk about believing women and protecting democracy, they're too busy playing politics with real lives. They've elevated a fraud, and in doing so, they've undermined everything they claim to stand for. And here's the final blow. While influencers like Harry Sisson rake in cash and clout, real activists, the ones who fight on the front lines, who risk everything to bring out the real change, are left with nothing. They're out here organizing protests, defending Medicare, and calling out billionaire greed, while the spotlight is stolen by a man whose only talent is exploiting trust. That's the harsh reality of our modern political landscape. It is what it is. But you can't say anything, because then you'd be labeled as a right-wing conspiracy theorist and a sympathizer, right? You're supposed to just sit there and pretend his actions are profound. In the case of Harry Sisson, of course, the media loved it. The White House loved it. In fact, they loved it so much, he even got to meet with Joe Biden himself. Because they could use both of them too. Harry says they didn't care about it. He could die and they wouldn't care. They'll find someone else to use as a marionette for their own dirty and cringe political ambitions. Now look at these tweets and people defending Harry. Oh, Brian Krasenstein says, "Ooh, let me guess, you voted for the sexual predator accused of multiple rapes, but then pretend to be angry at a 20-year-old guy who played women." Played women? So you're not denying that Harry played women and then instead shifting the focus to the other predator. Why? Because one of them is on your side. So if you don't like the fact that Harry Sisson, the guy who the DNC paid to do their dirty work, is deranged, which he is, and behaved inappropriately with women, then you're the bigot. But underneath all of this is the single most political move in the history of this country, and that is elevating all these nobodies who are clearly fraudsters and grifters, and that is precisely because he is a marionette. Because he is who the old boomers at the DNC think the youth wants us to look up to. A cringe, ugly, predatory Temu discount clearance aisle section guy trying his hardest to look like Robert Pattinson. That's why they chose him. They had an option. Multiple other options, by the way, actually. Their names are Brian Tyler Cohen, Jesse Dollemore, David Pakman, Walter Masterson, myself, Sam Cedar, Cenk Uygur, and Adam Mockler. These people all think clearly and don't act out of instinct and unhinged primal desires. And the people who run the Democratic Party just hated what we all had to say. So they picked a guy who had nothing going on upstairs besides luring gullible women, who checked their boxes so that they could control him. That's exactly what they do with everyone they flock to. Because they can't do anything organically. Courtesy of people like James Carville. I'm just waiting till they kick out David Hogg for standing up to these ghouls and stooges and lobbyists. So here's my challenge to you. If you're tired of this hypocrisy, if you're fed up with a system that rewards predators over principled people, then it's time to speak out. Demand accountability. Call for real change. Don't let the DNC get away with platforming charlatans and ignoring the voices of those who matter. I'm Tyler Carlin, and I say the things that you're too scared to admit out loud. I'm here to expose the rot. The left has lost its way by trading real values for shallow influencers. And until that changes, our movement is in jeopardy. We are not going to let Harry Sisson fade into oblivion. We're not going to let this become just another forgotten scandal. We're going to make sure that every voter knows the truth. The DNC backed a predator, and in doing so, they've betrayed the very people they claim to represent. Good night. Subscribe for more.